The night shift at Orbital Station Gateway 7 was always quiet, and Danny Torres preferred it that way. While most of the station slept, he pushed his cleaning cart through the empty corridors, whistling softly to himself. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as his mop squeaked against the polished floors. He had been working this shift for 3 years now, and he knew every corner of the station like the back of his hand. Danny was a simple man with a simple job. He cleaned floors, emptied trash bins, and made sure the station stayed presentable. Most people barely noticed him as he worked, and that suited him just fine. He had left Earth looking for adventure among the stars, but life had other plans. Still, he did not complain. The job paid well enough, and he found peace in the routine. Tonight, his supervisor had asked him to check the old cargo bay in Section D. Nobody used that area much anymore since the new loading docks opened on the other side of the station. Danny grabbed his equipment scanner and headed down the long corridor. His footsteps echoed in the empty hallway. The cargo bay doors groaned as they slid open. Danny stepped inside and wrinkled his nose at the stale air. Dust floated in the dim lighting, and shipping containers stood stacked against the walls like metal giants. He pulled out his scanner and began his routine check for any maintenance issues. Halfway through his inspection, the scanner beeped urgently. Danny frowned and looked at the display. It showed unusual heat signatures coming from the far corner of the bay, wedged between two large containers. That was strange. This section had been sealed for months. There should not be any heat signatures at all. His curiosity pulled him forward. Danny squeezed between the containers, his jacket scraping against the cold metal. The scanner beeped faster as he got closer. Then he saw it. A small escape pod, no bigger than a storage locker, was jammed in the narrow space. Frost covered most of its surface, and one side looked badly damaged. Danny's heart raced. Escape pods meant someone might be in trouble. He quickly examined the pod's control panel, but the display was cracked and dark. His hands shook slightly as he found the manual release lever. He pulled hard, and with a hiss of escaping air, the door opened. Cold mist poured out, and Danny waved it away from his face. He peered inside the cramped pod and gasped. There, curled up on the frozen floor, was a tiny creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It looked like a dragon from old Earth stories, but small enough to fit in his arms. Its scales shimmered between blue and silver, catching the dim light like precious gems. The infant dragon was barely moving. Its tiny chest rose and fell in shallow, struggling breaths. Ice crystals had formed on its wings and along its spine. Danny did not need a medical degree to know the creature was dying. For a moment, he just stood there, stunned. Dragons were real. He had heard stories about the Dragon Empire, a powerful civilization that kept mostly to themselves far across the galaxy. Humans and dragons rarely interacted, and when they did, it was always formal and cold. But this was just a baby, and it was freezing to death. Danny made his decision in a heartbeat. He pulled off his thermal jacket and carefully wrapped it around the small dragon. The creature was so cold, it felt like holding ice. He cradled it against his chest, trying to share his body heat. "Hang on, little one," he whispered. "I've got you." He ran through the cargo bay, his cleaning cart forgotten. The medical bay was 3 levels up, and Danny took the stairs 2 at a time rather than wait for the elevator. His breath came in gasps, but he did not slow down. The dragon infant felt so fragile in his arms. The medical bay was empty at this hour. Danny burst through the doors and went straight to the emergency treatment room. He had taken basic first aid training when he started working on the station, and he hoped it would be enough. He gently placed the dragon on the warming table and activated the heat lamps. The infant's breathing was getting weaker. Danny quickly adjusted the temperature controls, making sure not to warm the creature too fast. Rapid temperature changes could cause more harm than good. He grabbed warming blankets from the supply cabinet and carefully wrapped them around the tiny body. Next, he checked for injuries. There were no obvious wounds, but the dragon's body temperature was dangerously low. Danny attached monitoring sensors to track its vital signs. The display showed numbers that did not look good, but at least there was still a heartbeat. For the next hour, Danny worked without stopping. He slowly increased the temperature, monitored the readings, and gently massaged the dragon's limbs to improve circulation. He brought warm fluids and used a dropper to get small amounts into the creature's mouth. Gradually, the ice crystals began to melt. The dragon's scales started to look less dull. Its breathing became a little stronger. Danny pulled up a chair and sat down, exhausted but unable to look away. He kept one hand on the dragon's side, feeling each breath. Around 3 in the morning, something amazing happened. The infant's eyes fluttered open. They were golden, bright like the sun, and filled with an intelligence that took Danny's breath away. The dragon looked directly at him, and Danny felt certain it understood that he had saved its life. The tiny creature made a soft chirping sound, almost like a question. Danny smiled and gently stroked its head. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "Everything's going to be okay." The dragon's eyes closed again, but its breathing was steady now. It was sleeping naturally, not unconscious from the cold. Danny leaned back in his chair and ran his hands through his hair. What had he just gotten himself into? He looked at the clock. His shift would end in 3 hours. People would start arriving at the medical bay soon. Questions would be asked. But right now, in this quiet moment, none of that mattered. He had found a dying child and saved it. That was all. Danny sat there watching the dragon sleep, its scales now gleaming properly under the lights. The creature was beautiful in a way he could not quite describe. He wondered where it had come from and how its pod had ended up in that forgotten cargo bay. As the first hints of artificial dawn began to lighten the station's windows, Danny realized his simple life had just become very complicated. But as he looked at the peaceful expression on the dragon infant's face, he knew he would not change what he had done. Whatever came next, he would face it. For now, a small life had been saved, and that was enough. Danny managed to sneak the dragon infant back to his quarters before the morning shift started. His hands shook as he coded the door lock behind him, his heart pounding from the risk he had just taken. The tiny dragon was wrapped in his jacket, still sleeping peacefully against his chest. His quarters were small but private. A bed, a desk, a tiny bathroom, and not much else. Danny cleared out his bottom dresser drawer and lined it with soft blankets. He carefully placed the dragon inside, making sure it stayed warm. The creature stirred slightly, then curled into a ball and continued sleeping. Danny sat on the floor beside the drawer, watching. He had so many questions. Where had this dragon come from? Why was it alone in that escape pod? And what was he supposed to do now? He knew he should report this to Station Command, but something held him back. Dragons were powerful, proud beings. What if they blamed him for finding their lost infant? What if they thought he had stolen it? Danny had heard stories about how dragons dealt with those who offended them, and none of those stories ended well. For now, he decided to keep the dragon hidden until he figured out what to do. Over the next 3 days, Danny fell into a strange new routine. He still worked his night shifts, but every free moment was spent caring for the infant dragon. The creature recovered quickly under his care. Its scales grew brighter, and it started moving around more. It chirped and made small trilling sounds that Danny found oddly comforting. He started calling her Ember because of the way her scales seemed to glow like dying coals when the light hit them just right. Ember seemed to recognize her name, turning her head whenever Danny said it. The dragon was smart, far smarter than Danny had expected. She learned quickly that Danny brought food and warmth. She started following him around his small quarters, her claws clicking on the floor. When Danny sat down, Ember would climb into his lap and curl up, purring like a cat. Danny found himself growing attached to the little creature. He talked to her while he ate his meals, telling her about his day. Ember would tilt her head and watch him with those intelligent golden eyes, as if she understood every word. On the 3rd night, everything changed. Danny was halfway through his shift when the station's alert system came to life. Red lights flashed in the corridors, and everyone was ordered to report to their stations. Danny abandoned his cleaning cart and joined the crowd of workers heading toward the main assembly area. Station Commander Helen Price stood on the central platform, her face serious. Behind her, the main view screen showed something that made Danny's blood run cold. Massive ships floated in space just beyond the station. They were unlike any human vessels Danny had ever seen. They looked ancient and powerful, with scales built into their hulls that shimmered like ember skin. Dragon ships. Lots of them. Listen carefully, everyone, Commander Price said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. We have received an official communication from the Dragon Empire. They are conducting a search operation in this sector. The crowd murmured nervously. Danny felt his stomach twist into knots. Commander Price continued. They are looking for a missing member of their royal family, an infant princess whose escape pod was caught in a spatial anomaly 3 weeks ago. The pod's last known trajectory brought it to this sector. Danny's mind raced. 3 weeks ago. That matched the timeline. The frost on the pod, the damage. It all made sense now. Ember was not just any dragon. She was royalty. The Dragon Empire has requested permission to send a delegation to search our station, the commander said. We have granted this request. I expect everyone to cooperate fully. These are delicate diplomatic circumstances. The commander went on to explain the search procedures, but Danny barely heard her. He slipped away from the crowd and hurried back to his quarters. His mind was spinning with panic and confusion. Ember greeted him at the door with happy chirps. She had no idea of the chaos happening outside. Danny picked her up and held her close. You're a princess, he whispered. Your family is looking for you. Ember nuzzled against his neck, completely trusting. Danny felt his heart break a little. He had to give her back. He knew that. But the thought of losing her hurt more than he expected. The next day, the Dragon delegation arrived. Danny watched from a maintenance corridor as they swept through the station. There were 5 of them, each one massive and imposing. They walked on 2 legs like humans, but were easily 8 feet tall. Their scales ranged from deep red to metallic green, and their eyes glowed with inner fire. The leader of the delegation was introduced as Ambassador Christhor. He was a dark green dragon with silver markings along his jaw. He spoke to Commander Price with barely hidden impatience. We will search every section of this station, Christhor declared. The princess must be found. Danny noticed how the ambassador looked at the human crew. There was no respect in those eyes, only dismissal. The dragons moved through the station like they owned it, ordering people around and treating them like servants. Danny watched a young dragon officer shove past a human technician without even acknowledging her. He saw another dragon snap at a maintenance worker for being in the way. The message was clear. Dragons considered themselves superior to humans in every way. This bothered Danny more than he wanted to admit. He had saved Ember's life. He had cared for her, protected her, kept her warm and safe. But would these dragons even care? Would they see him as anything more than a lowly human who happened to stumble upon their princess? For 2 more days, Danny kept Ember hidden while the dragons searched. He knew he was being foolish. They would search his quarters eventually, but he could not bring himself to hand her over to people who looked at humans with such contempt. Ember seemed to sense his distress. She stayed close to him, quieter than usual. When Danny sat on his bed, overwhelmed by his situation, Ember climbed onto his shoulder and pressed her small head against his cheek. "What am I going to do?" Danny asked her softly. The question hung in the air of his tiny quarters. Outside, he could hear the heavy footsteps of dragon searchers moving through the corridors. They were getting closer to his section. Danny made his decision then. He would return Ember to her family, but he would do it on his terms, not because he was forced to, but because it was the right thing to do. A mother was searching for her child, and no matter how arrogant these dragons acted, they deserved to be reunited. He just hoped they would understand that he had been trying to help all along. That evening, Danny learned that Ambassador Christhor would be conducting a public search of the commercial district the next morning. It would be the perfect opportunity. Danny spent the night preparing himself for what he had to do. Ember slept peacefully in his lap, unaware that tomorrow would change everything. Danny woke early the next morning with a knot in his stomach. Ember was still asleep in her makeshift bed, her tiny body rising and falling with each breath. He watched her for a long moment, memorizing every detail. Her silver blue scales, the delicate wings folded against her sides, the way her tail curled around her body when she slept. He had made his decision, but that did not make it any easier. Danny showered and put on his cleanest work uniform. It was still just a janitor's outfit, faded blue with his name patch on the chest, but it was the best he had. He carefully wrapped Ember in a soft blanket, making sure she stayed warm and comfortable. "Time to go home, little one," he whispered. Ember woke up and chirped happily, not understanding what was about to happen. She licked his hand with her tiny forked tongue, and Danny felt his resolve almost crumble. But he knew what he had to do. The commercial district was crowded when Danny arrived. Word had spread that Ambassador Kresthor would be conducting searches there today, and many station residents had gathered to watch. Some were curious, others worried. The presence of the Dragon Empire had everyone on edge. Danny stood at the back of the crowd, holding Ember close to his chest. She was hidden beneath the blanket, warm and quiet. He could feel her heartbeat against his ribs. Ambassador Kresthor arrived with 3 other dragon officers. The crowd parted quickly to let them through. The ambassador was even more imposing up close. His green scales caught the light, and his golden eyes swept over the humans with clear disdain. "We will search the merchant shops first," Kresthor announced. "All humans are to stand aside and not interfere." The dragons moved through the district like they owned it. Danny watched them enter shops without asking permission, moving merchandise aside roughly, questioning shopkeepers in harsh tones. One dragon knocked over a display of earth flowers, and when the elderly shop owner protested, the dragon simply walked away without acknowledging her. Danny felt anger rise in his chest. These were good people, being treated like they did not matter. His grip on Ember tightened slightly, and she made a small, questioning sound. A woman standing near Danny whispered to her companion, "I heard the missing dragon is a princess, the daughter of their empress." "Princess Ashendra," her friend replied. "They say she was on a ceremonial flight when something went wrong. The whole empire is searching for her." Danny's heart sank. Ember was not just royalty. She was the daughter of the Dragon Empress herself. The weight of what he had been hiding suddenly felt overwhelming. He watched Ambassador Kresthor finish searching another shop. The dragon looked frustrated and tired. Despite his arrogance, Danny could see genuine worry in his eyes. They had been searching for weeks with no success. They probably thought the princess was dead. Danny took a deep breath. It was time. He stepped forward from the crowd. His legs felt shaky, but he forced himself to walk toward the ambassador. People noticed him moving and turned to watch. Whispers spread through the crowd. "Ambassador Kresthor," Danny called out. His voice cracked slightly, but he pushed forward. The dragon turned, his eyes narrowing at being interrupted. "What do you want, human?" "We are busy with important matters." Danny stopped a few feet away. He pulled back the blanket, revealing Ember in his arms. The tiny dragon blinked in the sudden light and looked around curiously at all the faces staring at her. The effect was immediate. Ambassador Kresthor froze, his eyes going wide. The other dragons stopped what they were doing and turned. The entire crowd fell silent. "I believe this is who you are looking for," Danny said quietly. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Kresthor stepped forward slowly, as if approaching something fragile that might disappear. His massive hand reached out, stopping just short of touching Ember. "Princess Ashendra," he breathed. Then his voice grew sharp. "Where did you find her? Why did you keep her hidden?" The other dragons moved closer, forming a circle around Danny. He fought the urge to step back. Ember chirped and tried to reach for the ambassador, recognizing her own kind. "I found her 3 days ago in an old cargo bay," Danny explained, keeping his voice steady. "Her escape pod was damaged and frozen. She was dying. I took her to the medical bay and warmed her up. I kept her in my quarters while she recovered." "You kept a member of the royal family hidden?" Kresthor's voice rose. "Do you understand the severity of this? You could be charged with kidnapping." "I saved her life," Danny said firmly. He looked the ambassador in the eye, refusing to back down. "When I found her, she had maybe an hour left. If I had followed official protocols and reported it first, she would have died while we waited for proper authorization to treat her." One of the other dragons spoke up. "He speaks the truth, Ambassador. Look at her. She is healthy and well cared for." Kresthor pulled out a medical scanner and ran it over Ember. The device beeped and displayed information. The ambassador's expression shifted from anger to confusion. "These readings," he said slowly. They show she was suffering from severe hypothermia and exposure. The treatment she received was exactly what saved her life. Danny nodded. I did the best I could with what I had. But why did you not come forward immediately? Another dragon asked. Why hide her? Danny glanced around at the crowd, then back at the dragons. He chose his words carefully. I was scared. I am just a janitor. I did not know how you would react to a human having your princess. And honestly, after watching how your people have been treating mine these past few days, I was not sure you would believe I was trying to help. The statement hung in the air. Several humans in the crowd nodded in agreement. The dragons looked uncomfortable. Kraesthor was quiet for a moment. Then he did something Danny did not expect. The ambassador knelt down on one knee, bringing himself closer to Danny's eye level. The other dragons followed his lead, kneeling as well. You saved the life of Princess Ashendra, Kraesthor said, his voice different now, filled with something that sounded like respect. In our culture, that is a life debt, a sacred bond. He reached out slowly, and Danny let him take Ember. The tiny dragon chirped happily and climbed onto the ambassador's large hand. But she kept looking back at Danny, making small sounds of distress at being separated from him. Kraesthor noticed this. His eyes widened further. She has bonded with you. The princess has formed an attachment. She knows I kept her safe, Danny said softly. I talked to her. Fed her. She slept in my quarters. I called her Ember. Ember, Kraesthor repeated. He looked at Danny with new eyes. I have misjudged you, human. I have misjudged many of your people. You had no obligation to save her. You could have left her to die, and no one would have known. But you chose compassion. The ambassador stood, still holding Ember carefully. I must contact the Empress immediately. She will want to know her daughter has been found. And she will want to meet you. Danny felt his stomach drop. The Empress? I do not need to meet her. I just wanted to return her daughter. You do not understand, Kraesthor said. You have performed a service to the royal family. The Empress will insist on thanking you personally. Before Danny could protest further, Kraesthor was already speaking into a communication device. The words were in the dragon language, rapid and urgent. When he finished, he looked at Danny with an expression that might have been sympathy. She is coming. The Empress is coming here herself. She will arrive within hours. The crowd erupted in shocked whispers. Danny stood there, still in his janitor's uniform, and wondered what he had just set in motion. The next few hours passed in a blur. Station Commander Helen Price personally escorted Danny to a private waiting room while the station prepared for the arrival of the Dragon Empress. Danny sat in a chair, still wearing his work uniform, watching through the window as crew members rushed around in organized chaos. Ambassador Kraesthor had taken Ember to the medical bay for a full examination, despite Danny's assurance that she was healthy. The separation had been difficult. Ember had cried out and reached for Danny as the ambassador carried her away. The sound still echoed in Danny's mind. Commander Price sat down across from him. She was a stern woman in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. But her eyes were kind as she looked at Danny. You did a good thing, she said quietly. A brave thing. But I need you to understand what is about to happen. The Dragon Empress is one of the most powerful beings in the known galaxy. She rules over hundreds of planets. When she arrives, you will need to show proper respect. Danny nodded, his mouth dry. What do I do? Just be honest. Be yourself. You saved her daughter's life. That means something to dragons. More than you know. She paused. But Danny, do not expect anything from this. Dragons are grateful, but they are also proud. They may thank you and send you on your way. That is fine, Danny said. I do not want anything. I just wanted to help. The commander smiled slightly. That is exactly the right attitude. 2 hours later, the sensors detected the Empress's flagship approaching. Danny was brought to the main docking bay, along with a full honor guard of station personnel. He stood near the back, feeling completely out of place among the officers in their dress uniforms. The flagship docked with a deep metallic thud. The airlock doors opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. The Dragon Empress entered first, and Danny's breath caught in his throat. She was magnificent, easily 9 feet tall, with scales that shimmered between deep crimson and gold. Her eyes were bright amber, filled with an intensity that made Danny want to look away. She wore armor that looked ceremonial, covered in intricate patterns that seemed to move in the light. A crown of crystallized fire rested on her head. Behind her came a dozen royal guards, each one massive and heavily armed. The entire docking bay seemed to shrink in their presence. Commander Price stepped forward and bowed. "Your Majesty, welcome to Orbital Station Gateway. 7. We are honored by your presence." The Empress barely glanced at her. Her eyes swept the assembled crowd, searching. "Where is the human who found my daughter?" Her voice was like thunder rolling across mountains. Everyone in the bay felt the weight of it. Danny's legs trembled, but he stepped forward. He was acutely aware of how small he looked, how shabby his uniform was compared to everyone else. But he raised his head and met her eyes. "I am Danny Torres, your Majesty." The Empress stared at him for a long moment. Then she moved. She crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, and before Danny could react, she dropped to her knees in front of him. The entire bay gasped. Even her own guards looked shocked. Kneeling, the Empress was still taller than Danny. She reached out with one clawed hand and gently touched his shoulder. "You saved my child," she said, and her voice cracked with emotion. "You saved Ashendra." Danny did not know what to say. He had expected anger, or cold politeness, or formal gratitude, not this raw emotion from one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "I just did what anyone would do," he managed to say. "No," the Empress said firmly. "Most would not. Most would have been afraid. Most would have followed procedures and let her die rather than take a risk." She stood, but kept her hand on his shoulder. "I want to hear everything. Tell me how you found her. Tell me what you did." So Danny told her. He described finding the frozen pod, the rush to the medical bay, the long night of keeping Ember warm and alive. He told her about the 3 days of caring for the infant, about how smart and playful Ember had been, about the bond they had formed. The Empress listened to every word, her eyes never leaving his face. When he finished, there were tears streaming down her scaled cheeks. "You gave her a name," the Empress whispered. "Ember. You treated her not as a political figure or a prize, but as a child who needed care. She is a child," Danny said simply. That was all that mattered. The Empress turned to Ambassador Kresthor, who had been standing nearby holding Ember. The tiny dragon had been watching Danny the whole time, making small, distressed sounds. "Give her to him," the Empress commanded. Kresthor brought Ember over. The moment she was close enough, Ember leaped from the ambassador's hands into Danny's arms. She chirped happily and nuzzled against his neck, her tail wrapping around his arm. The Empress watched this with wide eyes. "The bond is deeper than I thought. She has claimed you as family." Danny held Ember close, feeling her warmth against his chest. "I got pretty attached to her too." The Empress was quiet for a moment. Then she straightened to her full height and raised her voice so everyone in the bay could hear. "Danny Torres, you have performed a service to the royal family that can never be fully repaid. You saved the life of Princess Ashendra when she was at death's door. You cared for her with kindness and compassion, asking nothing in return. In recognition of this, I bestow upon you the highest honor the Dragon Empire can give." She drew a ceremonial blade from her belt. Danny's heart jumped, but the Empress simply held it horizontally between them. "I name you Flame Brother to the royal family. You are now bound to us by blood and fire. You are no longer just human. You are Dragonkin. You are family." The dragon guards all knelt. Ambassador Kresthor knelt. Every dragon in the bay knelt, their heads bowed in respect. Commander Price whispered urgently to Danny, "This has never been done before. She is making you part of her family. This is incredible." Danny looked down at Ember in his arms, then up at the Empress. "Your Majesty, I do not know what to say. I am just a janitor. I do not deserve this honor." The Empress smiled, and it transformed her face. "You are not just anything, Danny Torres. You are the man who saved my daughter when you had every reason to be afraid. You are the man who showed that humans have hearts as fierce as any dragons. You deserve every honor I can give you." She placed her hand over her heart, then extended it toward Danny. It was a gesture of deep respect. "Will you accept this bond? Will you become flame brother to the Dragon Empire?" Danny looked at all the kneeling dragons, at the shocked faces of his fellow humans, at Commander Price, who was nodding encouragingly. Then he looked at Ember, who chirped softly and touched her small head to his cheek. He took a deep breath. "I accept." The Empress's smile widened. "Then let it be known across all worlds. Danny Torres is flame brother to the royal family. He is under our protection, and he is owed the respect given to dragon nobility." She turned to her guards. "Rise, all of you. Show respect to my new brother." The dragon stood and bowed deeply to Danny. He stood there, a janitor in a worn uniform, holding a dragon princess, and felt like his entire world had just turned upside down. The news spread across human space within hours. Every news channel, every social media platform, every communication network carried the same incredible story. A human janitor had saved a dragon princess and been made part of the royal family. People could not stop talking about it. Danny woke up the next morning in guest quarters, far nicer than any place he had ever stayed. The Dragon Empress had insisted he be given rooms in the diplomatic section of the station while they worked out the details of his new status. Ember was curled up on the bed beside him, sleeping peacefully. He still could not quite believe it was real. There was a knock on his door. Danny pulled on a robe and answered it. Ambassador Kresthor stood there, looking almost friendly for the first time since they had met. "Good morning, Flame Brother," the ambassador said. The title still sounded strange to Danny's ears. "The Empress requests your presence for breakfast." Danny quickly got dressed and followed Kresthor through the station. People stared as they passed. Some pointed and whispered. A few even bowed, which made Danny deeply uncomfortable. He was still the same person he had been a week ago. The Empress had taken over one of the station's conference rooms for her stay. When Danny entered, she was sitting at a table laden with food from both human and dragon cultures. She smiled when she saw him. "Danny, please sit. We have much to discuss." Danny sat down carefully, with Ember climbing onto his lap. The little dragon immediately grabbed a piece of fruit from his plate and began eating it messily. "Your daughter has very good manners," Danny said with a smile. The Empress laughed, a warm sound that filled the room. "She is still young. She has time to learn." Her expression grew more serious. "But we need to talk about what happens next." Over breakfast, the Empress explained what Danny's new title meant. As Flame Brother, he was considered a member of the royal family. He had the right to attend court functions, to speak on behalf of the Empire, and to call upon dragon resources if needed. "Of course, you do not have to do any of that if you do not wish to," the Empress said. "The title is yours regardless. It is a recognition of what you did, not a demand for service." Danny absorbed this information slowly. "And what about Ember? I mean, Princess Ashendra?" The Empress looked at her daughter, who was now trying to steal food from Danny's fork. "The bond between you is real. In dragon culture, such bonds are sacred. Ashendra has claimed you as her guardian. If you are willing, I would like you to remain part of her life as she grows." "I would like that very much," Danny said honestly. The thought of never seeing Ember again had been eating at him. "Then it is settled." The Empress paused, choosing her words carefully. "I have also been thinking about what you said, about how my people treated yours during our search." Danny felt uncomfortable. "Your Majesty, I should not have said that." "No, you should have. You were right." The Empress set down her cup. "We dragons have always kept ourselves separate from other species. We believed ourselves superior. But you have shown me something important. Compassion and honor have nothing to do with species or status. They come from the heart." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "I want to change things. I want humans and dragons to work together, to understand each other. And I would like your help to do that." "My help?" Danny almost laughed. "I am just a janitor." "You are a bridge between our peoples," the Empress corrected. "You are human, but you are also dragonkin. You understand both sides. I am proposing that this station, Gateway 7, become a cultural exchange hub, a place where humans and dragons can meet, learn from each other, build friendships. The idea was ambitious and a little frightening, but Danny could see the value in it. What would I need to do? He asked. Just be yourself, share your story, help others see that despite our differences, we are not so different after all. The Empress returned to her seat. Of course, there would be benefits for the station and for you personally. Over the next hour, she outlined her plans. The Dragon Empire would provide technology and resources to upgrade Gateway 7. Trade routes would be established. Educational exchanges would begin. The station would become one of the most important places in this sector of space. As for Danny, the Empress offered him wealth, land on Dragon Worlds, a position as an official ambassador. The list went on and on. Danny listened politely, but when she finished, he shook his head. Your Majesty, I appreciate all of this. I really do. But I do not want wealth, or titles, or land. The Empress looked surprised. Then what do you want? Danny thought about it carefully. I want what you said. I want humans and dragons to understand each other. I want people to stop seeing differences as barriers and start seeing them as opportunities. If I can help with that, then I will. But I do not need to be rich or powerful to do it. Ember chirped and climbed up to Danny's shoulder, rubbing her head against his cheek. I just want to be able to spend time with this little troublemaker, Danny added with a smile, and maybe help make the galaxy a little better than it was before. The Empress stared at him for a long moment. Then she started laughing. A deep, joyful sound. My daughter chose well when she bonded with you, she said. Very well, Danny Torres. We will do this your way, but you will accept one thing from me. What is that? A home, not a palace or a mansion. Just a proper home here on the station, large enough for you and for Ashendra when she visits. She will need space to grow, after all. Danny could not argue with that. Thank you, Your Majesty. The weeks that followed were busy. The Dragon Empire kept its word. Gateway 7 received upgrades and expansions. Dragon scholars arrived to teach humans about their culture. Human teachers went to Dragon Worlds to share their knowledge. Trade began to flow in both directions. Danny became a familiar sight around the station, often with Ember perched on his shoulder as she grew bigger. He gave talks about his experience, met with dignitaries from both species, and helped smooth over cultural misunderstandings. But he also kept his job as a janitor. Commander Price had offered him a promotion, but Danny refused. He liked the work. It kept him grounded and reminded him of who he was. 6 months after finding Ember, Danny stood in his new quarters. They were much larger than his old room, with space for a growing dragon to move around. Ember was already the size of a large dog, and the Empress said she would eventually be as tall as a human. The little dragon was practicing her flying, gliding from the bed to the couch and back again. She was getting better every day. Danny watched her with pride. There was a knock on the door. When Danny opened it, he found a young human woman standing there nervously. Mr. Torres, my name is Amy Chen. I am a teacher from Earth. I just arrived on the station to join the cultural exchange program. I was hoping you could give me some advice about working with dragons. Danny smiled and invited her in. As he began sharing what he had learned, Ember landed on the table between them and tilted her head curiously at the newcomer. This was his life now. Building bridges, helping people understand each other, making friends across species lines. It was not the adventure among the stars he had dreamed about when he left Earth. It was better. That evening, after Amy had left and the station had grown quiet, Danny sat on his couch with Ember curled up beside him. She was reading a human book with him, her golden eyes following the words on the page as he taught her to understand written language. You know what, Ember? Danny said softly. I used to think I was just a simple guy with a simple job. But maybe simple actions can lead to amazing things. Ember chirped in agreement and turned the page with her claw. Outside the window, human and dragon ships passed each other peacefully. Crews waved to each other. Friendships were forming. Understanding was growing. All because one janitor had decided to save a life without asking what he would get in return. Danny smiled and continued reading to his dragon sister, knowing that sometimes the most important things in life come from the simplest acts of kindness. The galaxy was changing, one friendship at a time, and he was grateful to be part of it. The story of the human janitor and the dragon princess would be told for generations, but for Danny and Ember, it was not a story at all. It was just the beginning of a beautiful friendship.